One of the water. We got one, two.
Right. Could you tell us your name, please?
My name is Oscar Hoffman. I go by Aki. I'm the fourth or fifth Oscar, and so when I'm the last one too, because I didn't name any of my children Oscar. But everybody calls me Aki, O-C-K-I-E.
All right. Well, can you tell me about when you moved to Greenhills?
I was an infant. I was born in 1939, and my parents moved here in late 1939. It was just a new village, and it actually opened on April 1st, 1938, and the first residents lived about 4 houses down from where I am right now. And we actually moved into an apartment, I guess you'd call it, a condo, townhouse, that the government owned at 5 Foxworth Lane. We lived there till I was 5 years old. That was during the World War II time. And then we moved from there as we had more kids. The way Greenhills worked, if you had so many kids, you had so many bedrooms. This is a 4-bedroom, so you have a lot of kids to be in this one. But the first one we had was a 2-bedroom, and then as my parents had more children, we moved to a larger house on 8 Chalmers Court. And I lived there until 10 years ago. I'm the oldest of 9. There are 8 boys and then a girl. So my dad wanted a daughter, and it took him 8 tries to get it. We all live in Greenhills still, except for one brother. He lives in Fairfield. All of my 3 sons now live back in Greenhills, and all of my grandchildren that aren't away at school live in Greenhills. Now I have my oldest grandson is in medical school in Bradenton, Florida. His first year of medical school, and is a UC graduate. And my second oldest grandson is in his 3rd year at Ohio State University, and my third oldest grandson is a first year plebe at West Point U.S. Military Academy. We're very proud of all of them. So.
Yeah, sounds like it.
So that's 3 of the 17 grandchildren. We have 16 grandchildren and 1 grandchild, a great grandchild. So they're all here.
Yeah.
And it's sort of neat.
Did the Great Depression play a role in your family moving here in '39?
Yes, my parents got married in January of '37, and they were living in an apartment that was part of my grandmother's house up in Clifton on Decabach. It's still there. I just went by it the other night, and we were in like the first floor of that duplex or a 2-story apartment type house. And then when I was born, and they decided they needed their own place, I guess. And I mean, I was an infant then, but they heard about this and they moved out here. Greenhills was this little green island in the middle of nothing. There was no Whitten Woods. This was all heavy forest all the way around us. There was no forest park. There was nothing. Those that built it would ride out to usually New Burlington and walk over to here to do their work on this project. And so it was a real sort of a pioneer. That's why they're called the Greenhills Pioneers. They were pioneers out here in the middle of nowhere. And it was interesting. My dad, of course, now there's hardly any parking at all around town, but back then nobody had cars. And my next door neighbor on Chalmers, I remember him walking down to the Wright plant, which is now the GE factory in Evendale, and walked to work every day. And my dad took a bus. He worked with my uncle. They had a grocery and meat market down in the west end of Cincinnati. It's now been bulldozed down, and 75 goes over the top of it. But he would go to work early in the morning at 6 o'clock in the morning, and he would usually get home on the 9:20 or the 10:20 bus at night. So it was all, that kind of commute out to here. There wasn't a lot of transportation, so it was a real challenge for them. World War II was going on at the time when I was a youngster, and a lot of the parents were drafted or were in the service, and there were a lot of single parent families here during the war when we were growing up. I was fortunate that my dad never got drafted, and he didn't go into service. Mainly because I think they were having children like every year or two, so it was enough kids that kept him out, and then the war ended. So, but it was a lot of people out here in the same economic situation. Over the 80 years of the life of Greenhills, though, there's a lot of the original residents that are, of course, no longer with us, but a lot of the original residents that became very successful, and they actually did well financially.
Yeah.
And in fact, a group of them, formed the Greenhills Homeowners Corporation, which actually bought the village from the government in 48 or 49. From being a politician later in life, I always say that those guys really made a big mistake, because they just bought the village that we see right here. They were offered all of the land that Forest Park has and other land around here, but they didn't think they could afford it. And if they would have, we would have been a whole different situation right now than we are. We're landlocked with no industry or anything like that in Greenhills. So, it basically has served as a garden community, is what Eleanor Roosevelt really saw that these three Greenbelt communities would become. And so it's been an interesting ride.
Yeah. After that shift to private ownership, do you think Greenhills changed at all?
Oh, Greenhills changed a lot after that.
How so?
Greenhills changed because the town was expanded. The areas that were not the original Greenhills, which we're in right now, over on the eastern side of town, and that there was nothing but woods and open spaces over there, and that was all developed by developers. And there's a lot of areas over there that are developed. Even some of the areas in this original part of Greenhills were developed. The area that was in the B section. I'm sure that you guys understand that these were named basically blocks. I'm in the A block, and B block, C block, D block, E block, F block, and then there was G. The first two streets that were put on, that were added, were Damon Road. It was just a little road through there that went over to Springdale Road, and actually on the west side of Damon Road was a golf course. It was a 6-hole golf course when we were young, on that little golf course over in that area, that was destroyed and houses built on. And then there was Damon Road was built, and then Gambier Circle was built, and those were built basically for the returning veterans. A lot of the veterans came back. There were a lot of little Cape Cod houses, et cetera, et cetera. So that were changes. The original Greenhills was, what the government built until they ran out of money, and then all that was add-on. And then we were known for having a wonderful school district back then, and a lot of the people that wanted to move out here because of the great schools and the proximity. And then Witten Woods was developed, and the lake was filled up in 1952 or 3, I think it was. And so I was an 8th grader, so it had to be 53. And it became the community sort of that it is now, expanded. Greenhills actually became a city. We were the city of Greenhills for a while. In fact, I served on council during some of those sessions, and we had 7,000 to 8,000 people living here, and now we're down to about 4,000. So a lot of that I attribute to the people that came here as pioneers stayed here, and their children stayed. A lot of times the children stayed here. Now a lot of my friends there, they have since scattered, but the community grew, and then as the children that left and pursued other sites and other activities, and the older people stayed. And my parents, they had a house and all these kids, and then they were just the only people in the house, and so that's how we had a declining population. It wasn't that that we destroyed anything, or that we that we did anything different. It was just that we became this smaller community. And once we did that, we went back to become a village, and we become a village now forever by our charter. Our charter says the village of Greenhills will always be the village of Greenhills. Even if we would grow again and become above 5,000, it would have to become a city. We were the village. It's sort of like Amarillo Village is always a village by charter. So then we had to rewrite. We actually rewrote a lot of ordinances when we went from a village back, or from a city back to a village. And I was involved in pretty much of that. We actually sat in, 3 or 4 council people sat with one of our attorneys, and we sat down and rewrote ordinances that we needed to write to shift from a city to a village again. So that was a challenging time, but we what we put together all passed the tests of the attorneys, and we reverted back to the village of Greenhills, which we still are.
Taking a bit of a step back, I want to know more about your family. You said that your father owned a shop in Cincinnati.
Yeah, him and his older brother had a meat market and grocery store, and down on Freeman Avenue, 1030 Freeman Avenue. Now it was down in the area of Union Terminal. Freeman Avenue went right through there. Their store was on Freeman Avenue, right between Guest and Clark Street. So for the older people that might be watching this, that's where it was. I went to work down there. I was the oldest of all the children, and I went to work down there with my dad. I was 9 years old, and I would go down there and work in the meat market. And then as I became older, when I got my driver's license, then they put me to work doing all their deliveries. They had a lot of deliveries that they had customers that lived in Western Hills and Hyde Park and all these other places, and it was sort of ironic. They had a meat walk-in for holding the meat, and one of them for what they sold to the clientele down there, and another one with the choice and the better stuff that they sold to the clientele out there. And so I was involved in that operation from the time I was 9 until I was still going down there helping them out when I was in college, even though I had other jobs at the time. But got to know a lot of people around town, and really was good to learn the areas. We went out to Mount Lookout, and we went out to Hyde Park, and we went up to Western Hills, and we had customers all over. Some interesting people. So it was a challenge, and it was a way to learn the town, and it was a way to to be sociable, and meet people that were successful in their businesses. As I said, they came in and demolished that, and I can't remember exactly what year it is. I wasn't really involved in it too much. My dad and my uncle moved out to Walnut Hills then. And I remember that little store. They had a lot of clientele moved out that way, and that was the little store at Fairfax and Wold. But I would go there once in a while, probably after we were married. But that became the Cincinnati Tennis Club was out that way. It was right in their backyard, and the Cincinnati Tennis Club bought that property up from them. And so they basically went out of business, and my uncle was probably 80 years old by then at the time, so he was not well, so he didn't work. And my dad went to work then for a good friend of his that had a meat market over in Mount Lookout Square called Brackey Meat Market. And the Brackeys are no longer there now either, but he went to work for Ed Brackey and Ed Jr., and so he would commute the last part of his working career. He would commute from Greenhills to Mount Lookout Square and worked with them, and then he got cancer and passed away too young. But that was my dad's career, and my career working with him. We became really close buddies because we worked together. Now, I was really involved in sports too, so when we had sports activities going on, by working for my dad, I could always get out of work for that day to play ball and do these kind of things. But that was a big part of our lives. The kids growing up here was our sports and our music. I didn't never do music, but my mom was a stay-at-home mom, needless to say, with all the children that we had. and it really worked out good. I have to brag that none of us ever got in any trouble, and we all have been really successful. I'm probably the least successful of any of them, but I always say I'm the dumbest Hoffman. So anyway, but it was really good having Mom there all the time, and that's just the way it was here at Greenhills. There was a lot of stay-at-home moms at the time. I remember our next door neighbor, when their kids were all in school and everything, she went to work in the local drugstore up here. And some of them worked in the IGA grocery store. And we had, back at that time, actually I'm diversing, but the Greenhills Shopping Center was the first standalone outdoor shopping center, like that strip mall, I guess you'd call it now, in Ohio. So and that was something the government put in, and that was the work habitat for a lot of people. My mom never did go to work anywhere, and as far as I can remember, the building that we lived in, there were 4 units, and 3 of the women never did work in any of they were all just stay-at-home moms, and that's the way they were. Our next door neighbor on one side worked for Ford. The next door neighbor on the other side was a professional painting contractor, and the one on the far end was the chief of police of Greenhills back then, the beloved Johnny Baldwin. And so all their wives stayed home with them too. We all went to school here, the White Building. I don't know, you've probably been in there, you've probably been in historical societies over here, but we call it the White Building now. It actually was a gray building when we went to school. It wasn't painted white at the time. It was the concrete block that they originally built it with. And we went to school there from kindergarten through 12, but when I was graduated from the 8th grade, my dad says, you're going to go to Roger Bacon, because that's where he went. So I was one of 3 of our guys in our class that went down there. There was myself and Dave Staley and Bill Atherton. Bill and I are still really good friends. Dave's passed away, but we get a ride down to St. Bernard to go to school there, and then we would hitchhike home. And when we went to any of our kids or grandkids would be doing that now, but we did it, and I mean, we would be playing football or baseball or something somewhere way all over Cincinnati, and then we would get back to school. It'd be 6:30, 7:30, 8 o'clock at night or later. Sometimes after basketball, it'd be later than that, and we'd be hitchhiking out Witten Road to get home. So it was exciting and challenging.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Other people we've interviewed have described that sense of freedom in Greenhills, but you're describing a sense of freedom that went beyond Greenhills, right? That went all the way to Cincinnati.
Yep.
That's interesting.
One of the things we used to do as kids, I'm diversing, but we would get on the Ohio bus line bus on a weekend sometimes, and we would drive downtown and get off. It always went into the Greyhound terminal on 5th Street down there. And we'd get off the bus, and then we would go to one of those big orange places. You could get a hot dog and an orange juice there, or the Empress chili. I never really liked chili then, but and we'd get something to eat, and then we'd run through all the department stores. There was Shillito's, and there was Mabley's and McAlpin's and Pogue's, and then there were all the movie theaters, the Albee and the Palace and the Grant and the Keith's and the Times and all the Capitol and all those theaters. And you could go down there and you could spend the whole day from morning until night just running around the stores and having fun, and then go to the movie and then get yourself something, and you come back on the bus. So it was nothing to do. So that was, we would have things to do here, and then we'd have things that we'd get down there to do things.
Yeah.
Things that we had here was we had the woods. We called was totally, and we would go down in the woods and spend a lot of time in the woods. And we had built tree houses down in the woods, and we would go down and cut vines, and we would swing on the vines. I live right on the woods here, and I can still find vines down there. I showed my grandkids how to do that. We would actually dress up like Tarzan, and we had our loincloths on and go down the woods and have fun. So it was, you had to make your fun. At one time there was this big pile of mud they had CG&E had a substation over there, and behind the substation was this big pile of mud, and it was probably about 20 foot high, and it was like a mountain of mud. And then we would go over on that mud thing, and we dug all kinds of caverns in it, and and made mud balls, and we'd have fights with the kids from F Block. So I mean, you just had to do what you had to do. And then in the summertime, you had the swimming pool and sports, and the swimming pool was open. Well, when the back then the team was the Coca-Cola team, it was called, and that was predated the Pepsi Marlins, and actually in the summertime, Paul Hartlaub was the coach of the Coca-Cola team, and they would practice at the Greenhills pool. And if you were a good swimmer, you could be part of that Coca-Cola team for the summer. And so the swimming pool was basically open from 9 in the morning till 10 at night. And you would go swimming and come home, get something to eat, play ball maybe for a while, and go back to the pool. So it was a big part of the swimming was a big part of our lives. And one thing I know that growing up here is that almost every kid in Greenhills knew how to swim. So it was a good thing. And most of our athletic teams of the youth were really good teams because we had a pretty good group to pick from, and we always picked some better people. It wasn't the way it is now that they picked these select teams, that would call it now. And then we won a lot of city championships and came in runner-ups, and it was a big challenge to go down and play the Cincinnati kids, for the championships. Been involved in some of that too. So it made the summer go fast. And then the wintertime, basketball, as I said, sports were a big part of we would build our own little basketball courts. There were these garage compounds, we called them. The government there's very few of them left in town. The government built these garages with the foresight, and good foresight, that they would need them someday, for the cars. Well, back then there wasn't any cars. So we would climb up on the roof and get wood, and we would build these backboards and put a basket on it, and we would have our own basketball court outdoors in our garage compounds. And there was one on Falcon Lane that was a special one, and we had some special friends over there, and we built this state-of-the-art basketball court back in the 50s. And we had a big F in the middle of it for the Falcon Gardens, we called it. And we would go over there and play out over there in the snow and the rain and everything from morning until night when we were off school. So because you didn't have any indoor things like the kids do now. So it was a good time.
Yeah, I'm curious. You were friends with kids from all over the village, right?
Knew everybody.
Knew everyone?
Yep.
Did boys and girls typically play together, or did you play more with boys?
No, it was pretty. You would play mostly with boys, and although some of the girls I grew up with that are married and my good friends, we still get together, and we had a lot of good times. But it was more of a boy clique and a girl clique. I don't know why that was.
Yeah. Do you know what the girls did in their free time when you all were playing basketball or?
Probably playing dolls. See, the problem with me being the oldest of all these boys is I was in a different generation. Yeah. I was 15 or 16 when my little sister was born. I was carousing all over the place. So, there was a whole crew of girls that I'm still friends with, the ones that aren't passed away, that grew up on our street, and they were all together. I think that their whole life was boys and talking on the phone. Everybody had party lines back then. You probably don't even remember them, but if you picked the phone up and the wrong teenage girl or young girl was on the party line with you, you could never use it. You'd have to break in or hit the button or something, and then say we need to make an emergency. And my mom would always try to call down to my dad's store and have him bring something home, food, because she didn't drive and she didn't, she couldn't get around with all these kids. So so she'd have to break in. But I won't mention any names, but some of the girls who are still friends of mine were on the phone, and but there wasn't any. It was really unfair because there wasn't really any athletics or anything like that for the younger girls. The younger girls and teenage girls, they had to invent their own thing. A lot of them became really good swimmers. I know that, but I can't attest what those girls did. They would invite us to parties, there was the parties when there was birthday parties or some kind of parties like that. There were parties that the families had, and they would invite all the boys on the street too.
Mm-hmm.
But all the boys on our street were pretty close, and one of the things we used to enjoy is that we would have athletic events. The boys would have athletic events between the blocks, the A block and the B block and the C block and that. And we would play basketball, and we would play football, and we would play all these things. And the funny thing about it is that we would play all these football games, tackle football back then. And we had our own little park where we lived. It was called Palmer Park. It wasn't that, but it's named after Mike Palmer, who was a great spearhead in the athletics up here. But we played football there, and that was our home field. And then the guys in Burley had Burley Park, and then we had all these little parks that are all over town, which were designed as green spaces. And we had our own football teams, and we would play football. Well, then there were where Forest Park is now was all government farms. Those were farms that the U.S. government owned, and they rented them out. And some of my best friends from growing up in school, Johnny Wirtz and Lee Weber and those guys up there, they all lived on the farm. So they said, well, we want to play football too. So we all said, well, we'll play in football. So they came down here and played. So then we went up there one day. We all drove our bikes up to the farms and play football up in the farms. Well, the football field in the farms was in the cow pasture. Mm-hmm. And they did do a good job because they did cut a football field out of it with probably hand push lawnmowers. There wasn't any power mowers there. But when we played football up there and we came back home, we were playing with all the cow pies and all the stuff. So we came back home, and I remember my mom saying, just strip on the front porch, take everything off, and leave it there because we were pretty smelly. And get into the utility tubs in the utility room and get washed off. But so that's one funny story I remember about playing football in the cow pastures up there. Yeah. But we even included the farm boys in our stuff. There's just things, we just invented things to do, and that was fun.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the house that you grew up in?
Okay,
as much as you can remember.
The house I grew up in was from the time I was 5 and until we would live there after we were married. But it was at 8 Chalmers Court. It was a court right on the other side of town, and we had 3 bedrooms and all these kids. And so in this middle-sized bedroom, the biggest bedroom was my mother's and father's, and my sister actually, when she was a baby and younger, she slept in that room. And then we had 6 of us in bunk beds in the other room. So there was 3 sets of bunk beds in there and 6 boys in there. The biggest advantage about when we were growing up a little bit is that 2 of my brothers went into the seminary, and so that took some people out of the bed. So by the time I got into college, I had my own bedroom. It was a little tiny bedroom, but I had that so I could study because I couldn't afford to live there. So anyway, and then the neighbors were great. I mean, the Cushings and the Brownings and the Baldwins were there forever, and everybody got along with everybody, and the kids all got along with everybody, and the kids that I grew up with there, Bill and Joe and Pat Cushing, and Benny and Sally Browning, and Neil and Nancy Baldwin and Mark Baldwin. They were all just, we all knew everybody's birthday. We knew everything about everybody. Most of them are still alive. Pat Cushing passed away, but we were all close. And the house was a typical green government 3-bedroom condo, I would call it now. And we just, and when the government owned it, they would come around almost, I guess I would say every month or every 2 months, and a guy would come around and inspect the house to make sure you were taking care of it, because it wasn't our property, it was their property, and you paid rent. The rent was, I don't even remember what the rent was. It was before my time, but it was really relatively cheap in rent. And so they would come around and inspect it. If there was anything wrong, they would come in and take care of it. And they had people that worked for the village that did painting and did plumbing and things like that. So you would just contact the government and they would take care of it until it was sold. We would have to eat in shifts. The kitchen was pretty good size, but we couldn't. In our family, we couldn't fit in there, so we would eat. We would eat in shifts. Well, that was a challenge. That was at the time we got a little bit older. There were TV trays. Remember them? And you could take a TV tray and get your food and go into the living room. There was no family rooms or anything. There was a living room, a utility room where your washer and dryer, well, back then wasn't the dryers, were washer and your utility tubs and your furnace were in there, and that was first floor, and we had crawl space underneath that was unusable. But we had great yards, and we had a big park in our backyard so we could play, but it was a challenge. And then when they sold our house to the homeowners, bought it and they sold it to the individual people, everybody in our 4-unit bought their own. And my dad's purchase price was $3,000. That $3,000 for the 2 middle ones and $3,500 for the end ones. And I don't know why, because the end ones didn't have a door that went out to the backyard and they weren't any bigger. But they were, for some reason, they've got more money for those. So we lived in number 8, which was one of the middle ones. And as the GHOC sold it to the Greenhills Homeowners Corporation, sold it to the owners, to people, if you wanted to buy it, then you could then make changes. So we all got together, and it was a good thing that when everybody that owned the property, like in our building, the 4 people owned the property. Some of the buildings, one person that was the oldest tenant, or the longest in tenure, would be able to buy the whole building, and then that happened, and then they would rent it out, et cetera, et cetera. Back then there was a demand for them. You would never see a house up for sale. Somebody would know when somebody's moving out, and somebody would always want to move in it. But then at that point, then our parents started making changes. I remember my dad was the first one to change from the coal burning furnace to the oil. And then it was even worse when we got oil. This big tank, they put it in the utility room, which then took up some more room in the utility room because it was an oil tank that fed the furnace. But it was a better heat. Back in the coal days, on the kind of units that we had, there was what they called a coal bin. After we didn't have any coal anymore, we converted it into another bathroom, just a half bath, because we had so many kids, and the bathroom was a battle. So, but when we put coal in it, you would shovel the coal in the wheelbarrows, bring it in, dump it in there, and then put a slide thing in there. And then when you needed coal in the furnace, you would shovel it out, put it in the furnace, and that was your heat. And then after that, they came out with a thing called Happy Pack, which is with 10-pound packs of coal wrapped in paper, and they would deliver that on a big couple skids, and you would then carry those in and use that for your coal, which was much cleaner. But then after we got the oil, man, that was like new. We had another bathroom, and we didn't have to put coal in anymore. I made a lot of money in those days. For 2 tons of coal, you could get $2 for putting that in. If you were like a 8 or 9-year-old kid, shoveling that coal and wheelbarrowing it into these houses was hard work. But $2, man, that was a lot of money back then. So, we didn't have any money, so that was a way to have something to go up to the store and get yourself a potato chips or a pop or something. So anyway, so we did make a lot of improvements at the time, and then our next door neighbor, Gilbert Browning, being painting contractor, we were one of the first ones to repaint the whole building and make it. He made it really neat colors. He would change it every so often, and we all got together and worked on. When even I became a painter at a young age, because I had to help these guys out painting and do these kind of things. So it was fun to grow up there. Yeah. So then my parents moved out, and they moved over to Andover when my brothers some of them were getting older. They bought a house in Andover, and they still live there. Well, my parents don't; they're passed away. But one of my brothers and two of my brothers and one sister live there, and another brother lives in another unit that they bought. And then we bought that house from my mother and father, and we lived in there, and we raised our kids there. They were all in college and med school, and then one of my sons owned this place, and he bought another place over on Carini, and he calls me up one night and says, "Dad, what am I going to do?" He says, I'm closing on Carini tomorrow, and I got 2 houses. I should have thought about that for you, before you did that. So we thought about it overnight, so we came over here, and we bought this from him. We got him out from under it. And it was a kind of hard thing to do because I always told him one other time we were going to buy a different unit, and we told the neighbors that had lived there, that we had lived with ever since we were kids, that we were, we were going to move, and they basically just sat there and cried because my wife and I were doing everything for them. We were painting the buildings and doing, everything, cut all the grass, doing everything for them, and so. And they were all older then, and I told her, I said, "Well, we'll just stay here until they die." Well, they all lived into their 90s, and so we were sort of stuck there, and so we really loved it when we moved over here. We've been over here about 10 or 11 years, 12 years. So it's a lot quieter, and we love the woods. The property here has one of the three biggest lots in Greenhills. It goes all the way down in the woods. It's really quiet, and it's been a great place for us to basically retire, and we got a lot of room for all the kids to come over, and they have ball games in the back, and they get in the hot tub and slash all the water out. But that original house, I spent a lot of time there. I decided not to rent it when we moved. I just sold it outright, and we had just put in about, I'm guessing, $7,000 or $8,000 into the kitchen, maybe more than that. We had it all done the way my wife wanted it. It did a lot of work in it, and then we ended up selling it. So it was a big part of our lives. Used to shovel everybody's snow, and used to go out and cut everybody's grass, and my wife and I still do. She's in better shape than me. She uses a push lawnmower and does all this grass. And I finally, a couple of years ago, I bought a rider. So on this street, we sort of brought what we did on the old street. We brought it over here, and we cut a lot of yards around here, and a couple of village lots that are the turnaround down here that are grass. We cut those, and so we still try to stay active, but we just try to keep the community. It's been a battle, and then I sort of got into politics. I went up one time to speak for some of my older neighbors in the old neighborhood. They were having a problem with something they did in the park, and I went up to council to speak on their behalf. About a month or two later, I got a call from the council, and they said, "We're going to appoint you to council on the September meeting." And I said, "What? No." I said, "No, I don't even know what you're doing." They said, "I got too many other things to do." And they said, "No, we're going to appoint you." And so I thought about it, and I thought, well, I've done everything for everybody else, and maybe I should try to do something to save this community if I'm going to stay here. So I let them do it, and that's another story.
Yeah. About when was that?
Oh, I spent 35 years in council, so that was that was probably in the 70s. I retired as mayor at the end of 1999. And so that would be 35 years before that. It would be 60 something, I guess, in there somewhere. So anyway, sort of 17 years on council and then 18 years as mayor. But that was a labor of love. Mm-hmm. And because I was up at so many meetings, my wife would come and sit in the council meetings. There'd hardly be anybody there. And after one of the council meetings, the clerk of council announced to the then mayor that she was moving out of town and that would be her last meeting. And so Sue Jones was the mayor at the time, and Sue said to Joy, she says, "Would you mind doing this clerk's job until we can get somebody to do it?" And so she says, "Sure." She said, "Well, you're here all the time anyway, so you know what's going on." So she said, "Sure." And so she was going to do this job until somebody would do it. And 20-some years later, she retired from it in 2000, somewhere in the year 2000. So she did it for probably, how many years did you do that?
About 20-something?
25 years, I think.
No, not 25.
20-some years. So we sort of were involved in the village administration and government for a long time.
Yeah. Who lived in Greenhills? Let's say from the time you can remember, since you've been a resident for this whole time until now, I guess. Just like, how would you describe the people who lived here?
Ordinary people, good people that would do anything to help their neighbors. You didn't have to worry about criminals or anything. We never locked our doors. We never had keys. And the story about that is that for years and years and years, I would come home in the middle of the night when I was in college, and I worked at Kroger Warehouse, and I would just, go up and open the door and go in. And it was that way all over town. And then one year, our city manager, I don't know if you've talked to Dave Bohr, because he was our city manager for 35 years, and I talked him into being the mayor a few years ago, and now he's the mayor again. But he's the mayor now. He was a city manager for years. He announced one night that Channel 9 had voted Greenhills the safest community in the county at a council meeting, and they televised the council meetings, and nobody locks their doors here or anything. And all of a sudden, the police chief had a fit, because all of a sudden, there was some robberies and things, and they should never said that. So anyway, it was sort of funny, but that's the way it was. And there are people that that you went to school with and grew up with that are lifelong friends. I still meet with two friends that all of our families lived in the F block when we were young, and Don Kathman and Bob McDonald, I still have lunch with them at least once or twice, maybe every once a month or so, and just had lunch Tuesday a week ago, and we're still close, and we've all gone our own ways, and everybody's had great success. The one thing I can say about the kids that came out of the schools here, that when you look at the Hall of Fame of the Greenhills High School, there's a Hall of Fame that they vote people in every year. You've probably seen that if you've been over there. But for all those years I was mayor, I always issued the Hall of Fame proclamations, and I'd say, just about every one of them that I knew, or they, even if they were older than me, I knew of them, or knew them. And it was when they find out what was accomplished by these people that came out of this little community and this little school system, and how successful they've been all over the world. I mean, all over the world. We have people that were successful in sports. We have people that were successful in education. We have people that were successful in engineering. We have people that were CEOs of major companies. The CEO of Cincinnati Gas and Electric was a Greenhills graduate. Still see him once in a while. And you have a conductor of a symphony orchestras that came out of here. I mean, we've just have all kinds of successful people that came out of this little group of kids that grew up here and went to school here. So it's an honor and a privilege to have grown up with and known these people.
Do you think that everyone that lived in Greenhills, especially when you were growing up, do you think that everyone had a lot in common?
Absolutely.
You think so?
Absolutely. Everybody. For one thing, there was no like upper class and middle class and lower class. I would say we were all the lower class, because that's why you were out here. But everybody had family. I think that was a big thing. There were family. I mean, even during the war years when I was really younger, there were family. And if your friends didn't have, the parents, their father was gone, their mother was working because of the war efforts, World War II, then you were still, you were basically the child of the neighbors, people. I was just at a 60th reunion for the high school, and I keep getting invited to Greenhills reunions too, which I really appreciate. Besides going to Roger Bacon, it was our 60th year in 2017 for both of us. And Roger Paul, who was a buddy of mine, his parents were the first people to live in Greenhills. Fred and Clara Paul, they lived at 19 Avenel right up the street here. But Roger would come through the field and on the way to school and stop in our house, and he was just reminiscing with me at the reunion. He said, "You guys would be eating cinnamon toast and that." And he said, "I always try to get there in time to get some cinnamon toast and milk." And so it was that way, Everybody looked after everybody else's kids, and if you got in trouble, if you got in trouble with somebody else's house, your parents knew about it. It wasn't, So that, I think that was a big thing, that there were parents, and I would call them the big kids. The big kids would always watch out for us little kids, and the big kids would always teach us everything. I remember that one of the big kids taught me how to swim. He knew I could swim because I would swim good in the 3-foot, but he said, he said, it's the same swimming in 3-foot as it is 300 feet. So he took me down and dropped me off the board, and that's the way I learned how to swim, have confidence. So everybody looked out for everybody else, and everybody was in the same socioeconomic thing. The parents, they had bingo, and they had, once in a while, a couple times a year, they would have dances for the parents, and they had some areas for the teens back as we became teenagers. But it was just a great place to grow up.
Yeah. Was there ever pressure for people or for families to kind of blend in and conform, or did it just kind of come naturally?
No, I don't remember any pressure.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, there might have been.
Yeah.
But I don't. In all the and I had friends all over town. Mm-hmm. I had friends even when they built the newer areas over there, and nobody ever flaunted anything. Nobody ever. The only pressure I ever felt was playing sports sometimes, when you were in city championships or something like that. But other than that, I wouldn't still be here if it wasn't a great place. I mean, it's a struggle now. It's a struggle, but it's been a good place. It's a great place to raise kids. And almost everyone that came to receive their Hall of Fame plaques, et cetera, talked about what a great place it was to grow up. They couldn't have found a better place to grow up. Everybody watched out for you. All the parents watched out for you. All the people that coached you, all the teachers were great. And we're getting a squatter fire run.
So we can maybe take a break.